I'd love to be with for a few days, so we got Chief Red Asbell, Marv Clyncke, Harv Ebers, and Jim Dougherty. And these guys are just going to start talking, right? Hopefully I don't have to say anything the rest of the night.
Brooks, are we live?
Live.
Can you all hear? Are we live, Judy?
I'm buzzing.
We buzzing? You hear us?
Yeah, I pull up. Yeah. Somebody throwing an elk out there, huh? Brooks, are you just going to have something to ask a question?
Monty?
This is working on road.
You want me to pass the regular mic around, or are we going to be okay?
These people can see. They've never been around the killing people. We're very shy. Dougherty never could kill 125 deer. I called his buddy in Illinois half a dozen times, and he only killed little dinks. Or one time they did have a shot at a decent deer, and I always had to put his stands up for him. And so it flinched, shot up just over here, and he missed it. But Dougherty never misses in his life without an excuse. I said, Dougherty, why the hell did you kill that deer? Oh, he said, I hit that top barbed wire on that fence. So, you know,
It's an absolute lie.
And then, I don't want to do all the talking. Asbell, are you live?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. I can see this in the mirror.
Okay, all right. 20 years ago was what? Okay, my post. Okay, yeah, no, 20 years ago was this club. This club has come so far in 20 years, it's hard to even imagine. I wrote down a couple of things. First banquet I attended, first Pope and Young banquet was in 1969, and it was in Denver. And I would say there were probably fewer than 100 people there. And Jim Dougherty was one of them, for sure. And that was when they used to have the banquet during the season, during the bow season in Colorado. And the whole idea was to get bow hunters out there to hunt, and then they would take the weekend off. It's usually the second weekend of the season, and they would come to the banquet. So you had all these people in there. Some of them had bows in their hand. I remember Dougherty was in there in costume. He'd been bow hunting with Bamford, and had just shot a bear with him. Remember that? That would have been 1969. He lived in Evergreen. But one of the main things I remember there, and I wrote about this and talking about Glenn St. Charles, was Glenn was the president. He was, of course, the founder, and he was the president. But the board of directors had voted that they were not going to display the heads at the banquet. And as the banquet got closer, Glenn, without talking to the board at all, said, "That's not right. Those heads should be here." And so he grabbed myself and 4 or 5 other, at that time, young guys, and we took our cars, we went down to Western Archery where the display was, and we loaded all the heads in our cars, and we took them back to the Brown Palace and set them in chairs and hung them up and all that kind of thing. That's just sort of the way this whole organization started, and that was Glenn. He said, "Well, I know you guys voted we were going to have the heads here, but no, they should be here." So that's what he did.
I can add a little bit to Fred's deal too. He doesn't remember. I think I'm on. I think I'm live. But on that Brown Palace convention, Fred and I, Dr. this guy from Stuttgart, Arkansas, Rex Hancock, he's killed a new world record grizzly bear. And so we went and got that damn thing. and it was all crated. We take it in the front door of the Brown Palace. The Brown Palace has beautiful green tile floor. We proceeded to drag that crate with nails sticking out and everything. Here comes the manager screaming and shouting at it with a few choice curse words. So Asbell and I had to dismount the thing out of there, and then 3 or 4 of us carried it upstairs.
But the rest of that story, okay, one, the Brown Palace was like it was in Denver, right downtown. But this was like a 5-star restaurant. I mean, this was an unbelievable place. It was just really classy. Of course, they considered themselves really classy. And this is a fact. They would not start the Pope and Young banquet after they saw the people that were coming to the banquet, the guys walking around in camouflage and face paint and all this sort of stuff. And the club took up a collection because they wanted to be paid up front before they did the banquet. This was such a surly looking bunch of people. I remember that. Oh, yeah.
And he wrote out a personal check to supplement the donation.
Another thing that was really funny about that bear story was Rex Hancock. That was the world record. And here, when you walked in, here was this huge bear there. And the guys were kidding him about killing this little bear. And old Dick Mock and a couple other guys, Dick's here, they went in there and put a diaper on this bear. And then he walked in, here's this bear with a diaper on the thing. It's in a little baby one. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was Rick Cooley that did that. I don't think
Rick Cooley and maybe it was
and I don't.
You know, it was Rick and somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't think Hancock ever forgave him.
Carol Sabraska. Now, what's her last name now? I can't remember. Zanoni. Carol Sabraska.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Carol.
Well, at that banquet, we had the heads down at Western Archery. This is 1969. And I remember that was the first banquet I went to. And they had membership meeting, folding chairs, sitting there, and I'd say there were fewer people than we're looking at here. And the board of directors, Glenn was the president, Glenn stood up front, just stood there and talked, and the board of directors all stood around him with their arms crossed, and that was the very first meeting. I remember that.
Well, and then we had one in Boulder. If you can imagine this now, in Boulder, Colorado, we had a Pope and Young meeting in 1975. And Boulder's the biggest do-gooder place in the world now. I mean, it's just full of do-gooders, you know. Here we have the Pope and Young banquet there. And people were coming to see the displays and that at the hotel right down there in the middle of Boulder. And if you tried that now, why, they'd run you clear out of the country. But it was a successful one. We had a lot of big animals there. I'll never forget because they brought in what was Dr. Cusack. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Michael Cusack.
Yeah, Michael Cusack had killed the world record moose just a year or two before that with Ed King, wasn't it? And here's this humongous full amount of moose. I mean, that thing was so big it was unbelievable. And they brought that down there whole, shipped it down, and put it out in front of the Pope and Young banquet right there. And that was the main thing when you walked in the door, was that great big old moose.
I think the main thing was Cusack serenading my wife.
What's that?
Cusack would walk out there and sing to my wife.
Oh, yeah?
On the balcony. I got over that. She listened.
Yeah.
Conrad sings to my wife, too.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
He's a lot cooler than Cusack.
Better looking than
You know,
Do you guys remember George Moreline's bagpipes?
oh, yeah.
And at the first Bismarck, whatever that was, like 76 or something like that. Yeah, and here we are in a situation like this. Everybody standing around and drinking a little, and all of a sudden you hear these bagpipes. And if you've ever heard bagpipes, particularly in a motel hall, And here came George. George paraded all through that hotel, all night playing those daggone bagpipes. Our Ebers still refers to those damn bagpipes.
You know, another thing that was really fun, and of course all of these guys will remember because they were there, is my wife's grandfather and grandmother had a cabin up in the mountains. And so we decided we'd have a hamburger cookout up there in the mountains and take the board of directors up there. And I'll never forget Jim, Fred Bear, Harv, and all of us guys were up there to sing. And it was so neat because at that time that was kind of a remote little cabin back out in the middle of nowhere. And we all had this big hamburger cookout. And I'll never forget when Fred Bear said it just reminded him so much of being a grouse haven that we were back there. Remember that cookout we had up there? And that was a lot of fun. And of course, you couldn't ever think of doing something like that because we're too big. But back in those days, where everything was so small.
The first convention I went to was at McCormick Place in Chicago, Illinois, and a guy named Rick Cooley, of course, Fred. I think we had 15 or 20 regular members. There was no senior membership in them days, Jim. And well, the fellow Austin that killed that new world record white-tailed deer, I don't know, Dale Austin. No, what was his name?
It wasn't Dell, it was Dell killed it on
Mel Johnson, thank you.
Yeah.
Mel Johnson. And he sat at my table, I remember, and had a big new world record whitetail. But I've got to tell one, and JD's going to take one of them rocks to my head, but I've got to always tell this story of my buddy JD. And I spent more time in my life with Dougherty hunting and goofing off than I have with these other three guys sitting here. But I've got to stand up to tell this story. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, I think it was, at that convention. And I'm in my best Pendleton shirt. I've just, a few years ago, been in the military and I had a nice burr haircut. The door slams open in the back of the convention hall, and here comes three dudes walking in. Number one dude is Dougherty, number two is Cardinelli, who's here, and number three is Doug Walker. Well, you can imagine that was the days of, again, Elvis Presley. They all had beautiful blonde hair, looked like Alan Ladd, swept back with a big double ducktail. Cardinelli is a handsome Italian gentleman from New Jersey, and he's here in the audience. He had coal black hair, coal stuck back here. And of course, Walker always thought he was a damn movie star, had his hair. I mean, one of my wife's buddies. So they come strutting in like that. And I took a look at them three, and I said, what in the hell is this world coming to?
And, you know, I think it wasn't it about then when you and Bamford were bear hunting up there?
Yeah.
Larry Bamford, and a lot of you folks probably don't remember who Larry was, but Larry was the president of the Pope and Young Club back in the 70s. The late 70s, or early 70s, I mean, late 60s, early 70s. And he was quite a hunter, quite a guy and everything out there. And Jim went out bear hunting with him. And they called pretty late at night and said, hey, can you bring your dogs up? I have bear dogs. And they said, can you bring your dogs up? We shot this bear and we don't know where he went. And I said, well, no, I don't think so. I don't want to turn those dogs off on a wounded bear. So they said, well, we'll wait in the morning, we'll go up and check, and if we can't find them, we'll call you. And I said, that sounds good. So these guys go driving up. Now, this is in Idaho Springs, just above Denver. And they drive up this road right there, and the bear's laying dead in the market of the highway. He's running on a dirt road.
The dirt road was a highway.
Yeah.
It was about 40 yards from where I shot him.
Yeah. He drilled it good.
Somebody today alluded to G. Bredd. After he would go hunting, he'd come in. And I've been on a few hunts with G. Bredd. And if you hunt with G. Bredd, and I totally enjoyed it, you'll shoot 1,000 arrows every afternoon after you come in at noon. Because the only way you get Asbell and Ebers in at noon hours is to cut her bowstring. He shoots a lot of arrows, and that's neat.
Well, I remember, and I'm not sure I ought to tell this story, but I'm going to. Bismarck, the very first Bismarck, we had a hotel that we had